I shared that I had been put on medical leave. My daughter-in-law burst out laughing. Unemployed and useless. How does it feel knowing you'll end up living in the dump? I smiled. Sweetheart, I have a net worth of $3 million. She immediately turned pale. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought that sharing news about my forced early retirement would lead to the most humiliating moment of my 64 years. But there I was, standing in my son Marcus's pristine kitchen, watching my daughter-in-law Esme throw her head back and laugh like I'd just told her the funniest joke she'd ever heard. Wait, Esme gasped between fits of laughter, her perfectly manicured hand pressed against her chest. You're telling me you got forced out of your janitorial job because of your back problems? At your age? She wiped tears from her eyes, smearing her expensive mascara. Oh, Darla, this is just perfect. I stood there holding the casserole dish I'd brought for Sunday dinner, feeling my cheeks burn with embarrassment. Marcus was setting the table, pretending not to hear his wife's cruel words, just like he always did. Their two teenagers, Emma and Jake, looked up from their phones with uncomfortable expressions. It's not that funny, Esme, I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. The doctor said I need surgery on my lower back. The company couldn't accommodate the time off. This only made her laugh harder. Unemployed and useless, she said, loud enough for the neighbors to hear through the open window. How does it feel knowing you'll probably end up in some rundown nursing home? The words hit me like a physical blow. 30 years of scrubbing floors, cleaning toilets, and working double shifts to support myself and help my family when needed. And this is what I got in return. Complete disrespect from the woman my son married. Marcus finally looked up from the silverware. Esme, maybe tone it down a little. Tone it down? Esme spun around to face him. Marcus, your mother is about to become a complete financial burden on us. Do you understand what that means? We'll have to support her on top of everything else. There goes Emma's college fund. There goes our vacation to Europe. I felt something crack inside my chest. Not break, just crack. Like ice on a frozen pond when you step too hard. Actually, I said, my voice coming out calmer than I felt, I don't think you'll need to worry about supporting me. Esme turned back to me, her green eyes still sparkling with amusement. Oh, really? And why's that? You planning to live off Social Security and some government housing? I set the casserole dish down on the counter and reached into my purse. My hands were steady as I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. The numbers stared back at me, numbers I'd been quietly watching grow for 40 years. Because, darling, I said, turning the phone screen toward her, I have a net worth of $3 million. The silence that followed was deafening. Esme's face went from flushed with laughter to completely pale in the span of 3 seconds. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Marcus dropped a fork, and it clattered against the hardwood floor. Mom, what are you talking about? I kept my eyes on Esme, watching her process what she was seeing. 3.2 million to be exact. So no, I won't be moving into government housing. I won't be anyone's burden. That's impossible, Esme whispered, her voice suddenly small. You're a janitor. You live in that tiny apartment. You drive that old Honda. Yes, I do all those things, I said, slipping my phone back into my purse. But I've never been just a janitor. Emma and Jake had put their phones down completely now, staring at me like I'd just announced I was an alien. Marcus was still standing there with his mouth open, holding a handful of napkins. Where did that money come from? Esme demanded, her shock quickly turning to suspicion. Did you steal it? Are you involved in something illegal? I couldn't help but smile at that. After 40 years of careful, legal investing, she assumed I must be a criminal. Nothing illegal, Esme. Just smart choices and patience. The truth was, I'd been investing every spare penny since Marcus was 10 years old. While other people bought new cars and took expensive vacations, I put money into index funds and blue-chip stocks. While Esme spent hundreds on designer handbags, I was reading financial reports and reinvesting dividends, but I wasn't about to explain all that right now. Not to someone who just called me unemployed and useless. This changes everything, Esme said, and I could practically see the wheels turning in her head. Her entire demeanor shifted. The cruel smile was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like panic. Does it? I asked. Because 5 minutes ago you were laughing about me ending up in a nursing home. Marcus finally found his voice. Mom, I had no idea. Why didn't you ever tell us? I looked at my son, this man I'd raised alone after his father died when Marcus was just 8. I'd worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table and clothes on his back. I'd helped pay for his college, his wedding, even the down payment on this house. And through it all, he'd let his wife treat me like I was nothing. Would it have mattered? I asked him. Would you have treated me differently? He opened his mouth to answer, but nothing came out. We both knew the truth. Esme was frantically smoothing down her hair, trying to regain her composure. Well, this is wonderful news, Darla. Really wonderful. I think I may have come across wrong earlier. I was just worried about your health, concerned about your future. I almost laughed at how quickly she could change her tune, but instead I just nodded. I'm sure that's exactly what it was. The dinner that followed was the most awkward meal of my life. Esme kept trying to make conversation, asking about my investment strategies and my retirement plans. Marcus sat there looking confused and guilty. The kids kept staring at me like I was a different person entirely. Maybe I was a different person. Or maybe I was finally showing them who I'd always been underneath the uniform and the tired smiles and the endless patience with their disrespect. As I got ready to leave that evening, Esme cornered me by the front door. Darla, I hope you know that Marcus and I have always cared about you. We're family. I looked into her eyes and saw something I'd never seen before. Fear. Fear that she'd burned a bridge she might need to cross someday. Of course we are, I said, giving her the same fake smile she'd given me countless times over the years. But as I drove home to my small apartment in my old Honda, I knew something fundamental had changed. The balance of power had shifted, and for the first time in years, I held all the cards. The question was, what was I going to do with them? The drive home from Marcus's house gave me too much time to think. As I sat at a red light, my hands gripping the steering wheel of my 15-year-old Honda, I couldn't stop replaying Esme's cruel laughter. But more than that, I kept seeing Marcus's face. The way he'd looked away when she was humiliating me. The way he'd only spoken up when it was already too late. This wasn't new. This pattern had been building for years, ever since Esme came into our lives. I first met Esme 8 years ago when Marcus brought her to my apartment for dinner. She was 28 then, beautiful in that polished way that money can buy. I'd spent all day cooking his favorite meal, pot roast with mashed potatoes and green beans. I'd even bought a small bouquet of flowers for the table, which probably cost me more than I should have spent. So you're Marcus's mother, Esme had said, looking around my modest living room with barely concealed distaste. He's told me so much about you, but I could tell by her expression that whatever Marcus had told her, it hadn't been flattering. She perched on the edge of my second-hand sofa like she was afraid it might be dirty, even though I'd spent hours cleaning every surface in the apartment. During dinner, she asked pointed questions about my work, my education, my prospects. When I told her I was a custodian at the local high school, she'd given Marcus a look that I pretended not to see. That must be so fulfilling, she'd said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Working with your hands, being so practical. The word practical came out like it tasted bad. Marcus had seemed embarrassed by my answers, by my small apartment, by the mismatched dishes I'd collected over the years. When I brought out dessert, a homemade apple pie that had taken me 3 hours to make, Esme took one tiny bite and pushed the plate away. I'm watching my figure, she'd explained. You understand. I understood more than she knew. I understood that my son was falling for someone who saw me as an embarrassment. The rejection started slowly after they got married. At first, it was just little things. Holiday dinners moved from my apartment to their house, with Esme explaining that they had more space. Family photos that somehow never included me. Conversations that stopped when I entered the room. Marcus began visiting less frequently. When he did come by, he seemed uncomfortable, like he was fulfilling an obligation rather than wanting to spend time with his mother. Our phone calls became shorter, more formal. How's work, Mom? he'd ask. Fine, I'd answer. Because what was the point of telling him about my aching back or the teenagers who threw trash on floors I'd just mopped? That's good. Well, I should probably go. Esme's making dinner. Click. End of conversation. The worst part was watching him change. The Marcus I'd raised had been kind, thoughtful. He'd call me after every date in high school to tell me about it. He'd bring me flowers on Mother's Day and mean it. When his father died, he'd held my hand at the funeral and promised me we'd always take care of each other. But Esme slowly chipped away at that bond. She had a way of making everything about her, about their life together, about their future plans that somehow never included space for his aging mother. I remember the first time she openly disrespected me. It was at Emma's 5th birthday party. I'd saved up for weeks to buy Emma a beautiful doll. Not expensive by Esme's standards, but it had cost me nearly $100. When Emma opened it, her face lit up. "It's so pretty, Grandma Darla." But Esme quickly redirected her attention to the pile of expensive gifts from her side of the family. A tablet, designer clothes, toys that cost more than I made in a week. Later, I overheard Esme talking to her sister in the kitchen. "I feel so bad for Marcus," she was saying. "His mother tries so hard, but look at what she can afford. That doll probably came from a thrift store." It hadn't. It was brand new, and I'd specifically chosen it because Emma had mentioned liking dolls with long hair. But Esme had already decided it wasn't good enough. Marcus didn't defend me. He didn't correct her. He just stood there, loading the dishwasher, pretending he hadn't heard. That's when I realized I was losing my son. The exclusions became more obvious after that. Family vacations that I wasn't invited to. School events where Esme would volunteer to bring both sets of grandparents, but somehow forget to mention it to me. Birthday parties where I'd find out after the fact that I'd missed them. "Oh, did we forget to call you?" Esme would say with that innocent smile. It was such a small gathering, just immediate family. But her parents were always there. Her sister was always there. I was the only one consistently left out. Marcus noticed, I'm sure he did, but addressing it would have meant confronting his wife, and Marcus had never been good with conflict. It was easier to let me be hurt than to deal with Esme's displeasure. The final straw came 2 years ago at Marcus's birthday dinner. Esme had organized a surprise party at an expensive restaurant. I only knew about it because Emma accidentally mentioned it when I called to talk to Marcus. "Are you coming to Daddy's surprise party tomorrow?" she'd asked innocently. My heart sank. "What party, sweetheart?" "The one at Romano's. Mommy said it's a surprise, but I think Daddy already knows." I hung up the phone and sat in my empty apartment, staring at the birthday gift I'd already wrapped for Marcus. A nice watch I'd saved up for months to buy. Nothing compared to what others would bring, but chosen with love. I didn't go to the party. I couldn't bear the humiliation of showing up uninvited, even though it was my own son's birthday. Marcus called me the next day. "Hey, Mom. Sorry I didn't talk to you yesterday. I had dinner plans." "I know," I said quietly. "Emma told me about the party." Silence. Then, "Oh, that. It was just a small thing. You know how Esme is with planning." "Yes," I said. "I know exactly how Esme is. But he didn't ask why I hadn't come. He didn't apologize for not inviting me. He just changed the subject and pretended it had never happened." That's when I started building my walls. Not out of anger exactly, but out of self-preservation. I stopped hoping for invitations that wouldn't come. I stopped expecting phone calls that would never happen. I focused on my work, my investments, my small circle of friends from the senior center. I let Marcus and Esme live their perfect life without the embarrassment of his janitor mother cluttering up their image. But I never stopped loving my son, even when he chose her comfort over my dignity, even when he let her treat me like I was nothing. I kept hoping that someday he'd remember who I really was. Today, seeing the shock on both their faces when I revealed my net worth, I realized something important. They'd never really known me at all. They'd seen what they wanted to see. A poor, simple woman who cleaned up after other people. They had no idea that same woman had been quietly building a fortune while they were building walls between us. As I pulled into my apartment complex, I wondered if $3 million would be enough to tear those walls down, or if some damage was simply too deep to repair. I was about to find out. The phone started ringing at 7 in the morning, 2 days after the dinner disaster. I was sitting at my small kitchen table, sipping coffee and reading the financial news on my tablet, when Marcus's name appeared on the caller ID. I let it ring 4 times before answering. A small power play, but after 40 years of jumping every time my family called, I was starting to enjoy making them wait. "Good morning, Marcus." "Mom, hey." His voice sounded strained, like he hadn't slept well. "I was wondering if we could talk about Sunday night." "What about it?" "Well, the money thing. I mean, where did it come from? How long have you had it? I'm just trying to understand." I took another sip of my coffee, watching a cardinal at the bird feeder outside my window. "Why does it matter, Marcus? 5 days ago, you didn't care about my financial situation at all. That's not true, isn't it? When was the last time you asked how I was managing on my salary? When was the last time you wondered if I needed help with anything?" Silence, because we both knew the answer was never. "Look, Mom, I know Esme was out of line the other night. She feels terrible about it." I almost laughed. Does she? Or does she feel terrible about the fact that she misjudged the situation? "Can we just talk? In person? Maybe you could come over for coffee this afternoon." The invitation surprised me. In the past 2 years, I could count on one hand the number of times they'd invited me over for anything that wasn't a major holiday. "I suppose I could do that," I said. "Around 2? Perfect. And Mom, don't worry about bringing anything. Esme's making her special scones." After I hung up, I sat there for a long time, thinking about what had changed. Nothing really, except their perception of me. I was the same woman who'd been cleaning toilets for 30 years. I still lived in the same modest apartment, still drove the same old car. But now I had a number attached to my name that made me worth their attention. I decided not to dress differently for the visit. I put on my usual casual slacks and comfortable sweater, the kind of clothes Esme usually looked at with barely concealed disdain. If they wanted to talk to me about money, they could do it while looking at the real me, not some dressed-up version designed to impress them. When I arrived at their house, Esme answered the door with the biggest smile I'd ever seen from her. It was so bright and fake it could have powered the whole neighborhood. "Darla, you look wonderful. Come in, come in." I just took the scones out of the oven. She led me to their perfectly appointed living room, where Marcus was already waiting with a coffee service laid out on their expensive coffee table. Everything was arranged just so, like they were hosting someone important, which I supposed they thought they were. "So," Esme said, settling into her chair with a delicate china cup, "Marcus tells me you have quite the financial portfolio." I noticed she didn't apologize for her behavior at dinner. No acknowledgement of the cruel things she'd said, just straight to the money talk. "I do okay," I said simply. $3 million is more than okay," Marcus said. "Mom, I had no idea you were so good with money. I mean, I knew you were careful with spending, but this is incredible." "Where did you learn about investing?" Esme asked, leaning forward with apparent fascination. "Did you have a financial advisor? Someone at your bank?" I could see where this was heading. They wanted details, numbers, access. "I learned by reading," I said. "The library has excellent financial magazines, and there's this wonderful invention called the internet." Esme's smile faltered slightly at my sarcasm, but she pressed on. "Well, you must have had some guidance. I mean, janitors don't usually become millionaires." There it was. The assumption that because I cleaned buildings for a living, I must be too stupid to understand money. "You'd be surprised what janitors can do," I said, meeting her eyes steadily. "We're quite capable when people aren't underestimating us." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, she didn't mean—" "Yes, she did." I set down my coffee cup. Esme has always meant exactly what she says. The difference is that now she's trying to be nice about it. An awkward silence filled the room. Esme's perfect smile was starting to crack around the edges. "I think we got off on the wrong foot," she said finally. "I may have been a little insensitive the other night. I was just surprised, you know. It's wonderful that you've been so successful." "Successful at what exactly?" "Well, at investing, at building wealth, but not successful at raising a son? Or at working hard for 40 years? Or at being a grandmother? Her mouth opened and closed like a fish. Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear into the sofa cushions. Those things too, Esme said weakly. I stood up. I think I'll head home now. Wait, Marcus said, jumping to his feet. We haven't really talked yet. I have so many questions. Such as? Like, what are your plans? For retirement, I mean. Are you going to keep living in your apartment? Are you thinking about traveling? Buying a bigger place? I studied my son's face, looking for genuine concern, but all I saw was curiosity mixed with something that looked uncomfortably like calculation. I haven't decided yet, I said, but I'll let you know. As I walked toward the door, Esme hurried after me. Darla, I hope you'll consider joining us for dinner next Sunday. I'm making that salmon dish you complimented last year. I had never complimented any dish she'd made. In fact, she'd never asked my opinion about her cooking at all. I'll think about it, I said. But as I drove home, I realized I wouldn't be thinking about it. Not really, because I finally understood what was happening here. For 8 years, I'd been the embarrassing mother-in-law who didn't fit into their upscale lifestyle. I was tolerated at best, mocked at worst. They'd made it clear through 1,000 small cuts that I wasn't really part of their family. But now that they knew I had money, suddenly I was worth their time. Suddenly my opinions mattered. Suddenly I was getting invitations and special scones and fake smiles. The thing was, I remembered every slight, every exclusion, every time they'd made me feel small, and money didn't erase any of that. When I got home, I made myself a simple dinner and sat down with my laptop. I'd been conservative with my investments over the years, focusing on steady growth rather than flashy returns, but maybe it was time to be a little more aggressive. I started researching luxury travel companies, river cruises through Europe, African safaris, Australia and New Zealand tours. All the places I'd dreamed of visiting but never allowed myself to consider because I was too busy being practical, too focused on security. Maybe it was time to stop being practical. My phone rang again around 8 o'clock. Marcus, of course. Hey, Mom, I just wanted to make sure you're okay. You seemed upset when you left. I'm fine, Marcus. Good. That's good. Listen, I was thinking, maybe we could spend more time together. You know, make up for lost time. What kind of time? I don't know. Whatever you'd like to do. We could go to lunch or shopping or, well, anything really. Shopping. With Marcus, who'd never once asked me to go shopping in his entire adult life. That's very thoughtful, I said, but I'm quite busy these days. Busy with what? I smiled to myself, planning my future. After I hung up, I went back to my travel research. A 2-month Mediterranean cruise caught my eye. It left in 6 weeks and cost more than I used to make in a year. I booked it on the spot. Let them wonder what I was planning. Let them worry about whether their sudden interest in rebuilding our relationship was too little, too late. For the first time in years, I was looking forward to tomorrow. Not because I expected it to bring anything good from my family, but because I was finally free to disappoint them as much as they'd disappointed me. The balance of power had shifted, and I was just getting started. The questions started getting more persistent after that coffee visit. Marcus called every other day, always with some transparent excuse to check in. Esme began texting me little messages, photos of things she thought I might like, articles about retirement planning, invitations to lunch that she'd never extended before. It was almost amusing, watching them try to figure out how to handle me now that I wasn't just the poor janitor mother they could dismiss. But Emma, my granddaughter, surprised me with a different kind of call on Thursday evening. Grandma Darla? It's Emma. Hello, sweetheart. How are you? I'm good. Listen, I wanted to ask you something, but I don't want you to think I'm being weird. Emma was 16 now, old enough to see through her parents' sudden change in behavior. She'd always been a sharp kid, even when she was little. You can ask me anything, Emma. Is it true that you have all that money? Like, millions of dollars? I paused, considering how much to tell her. It's true. But how? I mean, no offense, but you've always seemed like, well, like you didn't have very much. Out of the mouths of babes. What makes you think that? Well, you live in that small apartment and you drive that old car. And Mom always says, she trailed off. What does your mother always say? Nothing. Forget it. Emma, it's okay. You can tell me. A long pause. She says you're not good with money, that you live paycheck to paycheck and that's why you can't afford nice things. I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, the one that came whenever I was reminded of how my own family talked about me behind my back. Well, I said carefully, your mother was wrong about that. But why didn't you ever say anything? Why did you let us think you were broke? It was a fair question, and one I'd been asking myself. I suppose I didn't think it mattered. Money doesn't change who you are, Emma. I'm the same person I was before you knew about it. But it changes how people treat you. Smart girl. Yes, it does. Have you noticed that? Yeah. Mom's been acting really weird. She keeps talking about you like you're some kind of financial genius. Yesterday, she spent 20 minutes telling Mrs. Henderson next door about your investment portfolio. She's never talked about you like that before. I had to smile at that. Esme was bragging about me to the neighbors. After years of being embarrassed by my existence, now she was using me as a status symbol. Emma, can I tell you something? Just between us? Sure. The money didn't come from some magic investment strategy. It came from working hard and saving every penny I could for 40 years. While other people bought new cars, I kept driving old ones. While they went on expensive vacations, I stayed home. While they bought designer clothes, I shopped at thrift stores. But why? Why live like that if you had money? Because I didn't have money then. I was building it, slowly, bit by bit, and because I learned early in life that financial security was more important than looking impressive. I could hear her processing this. So you could have afforded nice things all along, but you chose not to. In recent years, yes, but by then, I'd gotten used to living simply. And honestly, Emma, I wasn't sure I'd be welcome at the kind of places where people with money spend their time. What do you mean? How could I explain to a 16-year-old that her own parents had made me feel like I didn't belong in their world? That I'd learned to stay small and invisible because every time I tried to be part of their life, I was reminded that I wasn't good enough? Sometimes people make assumptions about you based on your job or where you live, I said instead. It's easier to let them think what they want than to constantly prove yourself. That's really sad, Grandma. It was sad. I was just beginning to realize how sad it had been. Emma, can I ask you something now? Sure. How do you feel about the way your parents are acting? About this sudden interest in spending time with me? Another long pause. Honestly, it's kind of gross. Like, where were all these invitations before? Why does having money make you more interesting to them? I felt a surge of love for this honest, perceptive girl. You're very wise for 16. I'm not wise. I just pay attention. And I've always thought they treated you badly. My throat tightened. You have? Yeah. Like, you're my grandmother, but I barely know you because they never include you in anything. And when you do come over, Mom acts like she's doing you some huge favor by letting you be there. Hearing it from Emma's perspective made it even more painful. If a teenager could see how badly I'd been treated, then Marcus and Esme certainly knew what they were doing. I'm glad you called me, Emma. It means a lot. Grandma, can I ask you one more thing? Of course. What are you going to do with all that money? I thought about the cruise I'd booked, about the travel brochures I'd been collecting, about all the dreams I'd deferred for decades. I'm going to live my life, I said. Finally. The next morning, I decided it was time to satisfy Marcus and Esme's curiosity about my money. Not because I owed them an explanation, but because I wanted them to understand exactly how wrong they'd been about me. I invited them over to my apartment for coffee. When Esme walked in, I could see her trying not to wrinkle her nose at my modest furniture and small rooms. She sat on the edge of my sofa like she was afraid of catching something. So, Marcus said after we'd exchanged pleasantries, we were hoping you might tell us more about your investments, how you got started, what your strategy was. I pulled out a folder I'd prepared. Inside were bank statements going back 20 years, investment records, and a handwritten ledger where I'd tracked every purchase and sale. It started in 1985, I said, opening the folder. Your father had just died, Marcus, and I realized I needed to plan for my future. I couldn't count on anyone else to take care of me. I handed them a copy of my first investment statement. $50 in a mutual fund. $50? Esme said, looking at the paper like it might be fake. That's all I could afford that month, but I added to it every month after that. Sometimes it was $50, sometimes $25. Whatever I could squeeze out of my budget. I showed them the progression over the years, how $50 became $100, then $500, then $1,000, how I researched companies and bought individual stocks, how I reinvested every dividend, never touching the principal. This is incredible, Marcus said, flipping through the pages. I had no idea you knew anything about investing. You never asked, I said simply. Esme was staring at a recent statement showing my current portfolio value. You've been millionaire for years. For about 5 years, yes. But you never said anything. You never changed how you lived. Why would I? I was comfortable with my life, but you could have afforded so much more, Esme said. A bigger apartment, a new car, nice clothes. Could have, yes. But I was saving for something more important than material things. What's that? Marcus asked. I looked at my son, this man I'd raised alone, who'd grown up to be so focused on appearances and status that he'd forgotten what really mattered. Freedom, I said. The freedom to live my life on my own terms. The freedom to not depend on anyone else. The freedom to make choices based on what I want, not what I can afford. They didn't understand. I could see it in their faces. To them, money was for spending, for showing off, for buying things that would impress other people. So what are your plans now? Esme asked. Are you going to invest in real estate? Start a business? I'm going on a cruise, I said. 2 months in the Mediterranean. I leave in 5 weeks. A cruise? Marcus sounded shocked. By yourself? Yes, by yourself. I've always wanted to see Europe, and now I can afford to do it properly. But that's so dangerous, Esme said. A woman your age, traveling alone. I almost laughed. Esme, I've been taking care of myself for 64 years. I think I can handle a luxury cruise ship. How much is it costing? Marcus asked. I told them. Esme's eyes went wide. That's more than we spend on our vacation budget for 3 years, she said. Well, I said, standing up to signal the visit was over. I suppose I can afford it. As they left, I could see them exchanging looks, trying to process this new version of me. The woman who'd been invisible to them for so long was suddenly making decisions they couldn't control or understand. And for the first time in years, I was perfectly fine with their confusion. I had 40 years of being overlooked to make up for, and I was just getting started. 3 weeks before my cruise departure, the desperation became impossible to ignore. Marcus was calling daily now, each conversation more strained than the last. Esme had started showing up at my apartment unannounced, always with some transparent excuse. She was in the neighborhood or had extra groceries she thought I might want. But it was the invitation to Emma's graduation party that finally forced everything into the open. We're having a big celebration, Esme said during one of her surprise visits, perched uncomfortably on my couch with a forced smile. Emma specifically asked if you'd be there. She wants to introduce you to all her friends. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I'd missed graduations, birthday parties, and school events because I wasn't invited. Now, suddenly, Emma wanted to show me off to her friends. What's different about this graduation? I asked. Esme's smile flickered. What do you mean? I mean, I wasn't invited to Jake's graduation from middle school last year. I found out about it from a neighbor who saw the photos on Facebook. That was just a small family thing. Your parents were there. Your sister was there. Your nephew flew in from Colorado. Esme shifted uncomfortably. We thought you'd be working. You never asked if I was working. You never called at all. The pretense was getting harder for her to maintain. I could see the calculation in her eyes, trying to figure out how to navigate this conversation without admitting the truth. Darla, I think you might be misremembering some things. We've always tried to include you. I stood up and walked to my bookshelf, pulling out a photo album I'd kept over the years. Family pictures, mostly ones I'd taken myself during the few events I was actually invited to attend. Let's see, I said, flipping through pages. Here's Marcus's birthday party 2 years ago, the one Emma accidentally told me about. Notice I'm not in any of these photos? Esme's face went pale as I showed her picture after picture of family gatherings I'd been excluded from. Here's Christmas at your house 3 years ago, and Easter the year before that, and Emma's confirmation party. I looked up at her. I'm missing from all of them because I wasn't invited to any of them. Those were just small gatherings. Stop. My voice was sharper than I'd intended. Just stop lying, Esme. We both know exactly what's been happening here for 8 years. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to find words that wouldn't make things worse. You decided I was an embarrassment the day Marcus brought you to meet me, I continued. You saw my apartment, my job, my secondhand furniture, and you made a judgment. I wasn't good enough for your upscale lifestyle. That's not true, isn't it? When was the last time you introduced me to your friends as your mother-in-law? When was the last time you mentioned me in conversation without apologizing for my existence? Tears started forming in her eyes, but I couldn't tell if they were genuine or performed. You excluded me from every aspect of your family life, I said. You made Marcus choose between keeping peace with you and maintaining a relationship with me. And he chose you, every single time. He loves you, she whispered. Does he? Or does he just feel obligated to check on me now that he knows I have money? The question hung in the air between us, because we both knew the answer. That evening, Marcus called to follow up on the graduation invitation. Mom, Esme said you seemed upset about the party. Is everything okay? No, Marcus. Everything is not okay. What's wrong? You know what's wrong. You've known for years. A long silence. Then, I think you're being a little unfair. Unfair? To whom? To Esme. She's trying to make things right. She's trying to make things right now. After 8 years of making them wrong, the question is, why now? Because family is important, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Family has always been important, Marcus. At least, it should have been. Another silence. I could hear him breathing, could almost feel him wrestling with words he didn't want to say. Look, Mom, I know things haven't been perfect, but we're trying to fix that now. Are you? Or are you trying to manage me because you're afraid of what I might do with my money? That's not fair. Isn't it? Be honest with me, Marcus. If you'd never found out about my savings, would we be having this conversation? Would Esme be showing up at my apartment with grocery bags and forced smiles? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. I need to ask you something, I said, and I want you to think carefully before you respond. Okay. Do you remember your father's funeral? Of course. Do you remember what you promised me that day? A pause. I promised we'd always take care of each other. That's right. You were 16 years old and you held my hand and promised that no matter what happened, we'd always be there for each other. I remember. What happened to that promise, Marcus? His voice was quiet when he answered. I don't know. I do. You met a woman who was ashamed of where you came from, and you decided it was easier to be ashamed too than to defend me. Mom, that's not... Let me finish. For 8 years, you let her exclude me from your life. You stood by while she made it clear that I wasn't welcome in your home, at your table, in your family. You chose her comfort over my dignity. Every single time. I could hear him crying now, soft sounds that broke my heart even as I continued. And now that you know I have money, suddenly I'm worthy of your attention again. Suddenly I matter. You've always mattered, have I? Because it didn't feel that way when I was eating dinner alone on Emma's birthday, because you forgot to invite me. It didn't feel that way when I found out about Jake's school play from the newspaper instead of from you. I'm sorry, he whispered. I know you are. But sorry doesn't change the fact that you chose her over me for 8 years, and now you need to choose again. What do you mean? I took a deep breath, knowing that what I said next would change everything between us forever. I mean, you need to decide what kind of relationship you want with me going forward. Do you want a real relationship, where I'm treated like family and not like an obligation? Or do you want to keep pretending everything's fine while your wife manages me like a difficult asset? That's not what we're doing. Isn't it? Then prove it. How? Stand up to her. The next time she makes a dismissive comment about me, correct her. The next time she tries to exclude me from something, insist I be included. Show me that you remember what it means to be my son. And if I can't do that, then we'll both know where we stand. The conversation ended there. Marcus mumbled something about needing to think, and we hung up. 3 days later, Emma called me. Grandma? I heard Mom and Dad fighting about you. What were they saying? Dad wants to invite you to the graduation party, but Mom says it will be awkward because her parents will be there and they don't know about your money yet. There it was. Even now, even after everything, Esme was still trying to control the narrative. She doesn't want them to know that their son-in-law's mother is wealthy? I asked. I guess not. She said something about it changing how they see our family. And what do you think about that? I think it's stupid. You're my grandmother. I want you at my party. Even if it makes your mother uncomfortable? Especially if it makes her uncomfortable. She's been mean to you for years, Grandma. Everyone knows it. Out of the mouths of babes. That evening, Marcus called one final time. Mom, I've been thinking about what you said. And? You're right, about everything. Esme has been unfair to you, and I've let it happen. Yes, you have. I want to fix it. I want you at Emma's party. I want you to be part of our family again. And Esme? A long pause. Esme will have to adjust. It was a start. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a crack in the wall that had stood between us for so long. What about after the party? I asked. What happens when the novelty of having a wealthy mother wears off? I don't know, he said honestly. But I'd like to find out. I looked around my small apartment, at the suitcases I'd already started packing for my cruise, at the travel brochures scattered across my coffee table. I'll come to the party, I said finally. But Marcus? Yeah? This is your last chance to get this right. I'm 64 years old, and I'm done waiting for my family to decide I'm worth their time. I understand. I hope you do, because after my cruise, I'm going to be making some big changes in my life. And whether you're part of those changes is entirely up to you. The graduation party would be our test. A chance to see if 8 years of damage could be repaired, or if some bridges were simply too burned to rebuild. Either way, I was finally free to find out. Emma's graduation party was everything I expected it to be, and nothing like I'd hoped. I arrived at 6 o'clock sharp, wearing a dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion. Nothing too expensive, but nicer than my usual attire. Marcus answered the door with a nervous smile. Mom, you look great. Come in. The house was full of people I didn't recognize. Emma's friends, their parents, Esme's extended family. I could feel eyes following me as Marcus led me through the crowd, whispers trailing in my wake. Esme appeared at my elbow almost immediately, her smile so forced it looked painful. Darla, I'm so glad you could make it. Let me introduce you to my parents. She guided me toward an older couple standing by the kitchen island. I recognized them from family photos, though we'd never actually met. Mom, Dad, this is Marcus's mother, Darla. Her father extended his hand with polite confusion. Nice to finally meet you. I don't think we've crossed paths before. No, I said, shaking his hand. We haven't. Esme jumped in quickly. Darla's been very busy with work over the years. She's in facility management. Facility management. Not janitorial work, not cleaning. Even now, she couldn't bring herself to tell the truth about what I did for a living. Oh, that's interesting, her mother said with the kind of polite disinterest reserved for people you don't expect to see again. Actually, I said, looking directly at Esme, I was a custodian at the local high school for 30 years. I just retired. The silence that followed was deafening. Esme's parents looked confused, glancing between their daughter and me as if trying to solve a puzzle. A custodian, her father repeated slowly. Yes, I cleaned classrooms and bathrooms, mopped floors, emptied trash cans. I smiled pleasantly. It's honest work. Esme's face went through several color changes. Darla's being modest. She's also quite the financial expert. Is that so? Her mother asked, clearly struggling to reconcile the image of a janitor with financial expertise. I've done well with my investments over the years, I said simply. Before anyone could ask follow-up questions, Emma appeared at my side with a group of her friends. Everyone, this is my Grandma Darla. Grandma, these are my friends from school. The kids were refreshingly direct. One of them, a girl with bright pink hair, immediately asked, "Are you the grandmother who's like, super rich?" Emma blushed. "Ashley, you can't just ask people that." "It's okay," I said, amused by their honesty. "Yes, I suppose I am." "That's so cool," another boy said. "My grandparents just complain about their arthritis and watch old movies." "Well, I complain about my arthritis too. The money doesn't change that." They laughed, and I found myself relaxing for the first time all evening. These kids didn't care that I'd been a janitor or that I lived in a small apartment. They were just interested in getting to know me. For the next hour, I sat with Emma's friends, answering their questions about investing, travel, and life in general. They were smart, curious kids who treated me like a person rather than a problem to be managed. But across the room, I could see Esme getting increasingly agitated. She kept glancing over at our group, her smile growing more strained by the minute. Finally, she approached with a plate of appetizers. "Darla, can I speak with you privately for a moment?" I excused myself from the kids and followed her to the empty dining room. "What are you doing?" she hissed as soon as we were alone. "Having a conversation with my granddaughter's friends. Was I supposed to ask permission?" "You're telling them you were a janitor." "I was a janitor, Esme, for 30 years. But you don't have to advertise it. These are influential families. Their parents own businesses. They're professionals. What are they going to think?" I stared at her, finally understanding that nothing had really changed. She wasn't sorry for how she'd treated me. She was just afraid of how my presence might reflect on her. "I don't care what they think," I said quietly. "Well, I do. This is my social circle, Darla. My reputation. And I'm what exactly? An embarrassment you have to manage." "That's not what I meant." "Yes, it is. It's exactly what you meant. Even now, with everything you know about me, you're still ashamed of who I am." Her face crumpled. "I just want tonight to go smoothly." "For whom? For Emma, who clearly enjoys having her grandmother here? Or for you, because you're afraid your friends might find out you married into a working-class family?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. I walked back to the living room, where Marcus was talking with some of the other parents. When he saw me approaching, he smiled and put his arm around my shoulders. "Everyone, I want you to meet my mother, Darla. She just retired after an incredible career." I waited to see how he would describe that career. "She worked in education for 30 years, he said, "and somehow managed to become quite the investment guru on the side. Education, not janitorial work." He was still trying to spin the truth into something more palatable. "Actually," I said, gently removing his arm from my shoulders, "I was a custodian, a janitor. I cleaned schools." The group looked uncomfortable, unsure how to respond to my directness. "And you know what?" I continued. "I was damn good at it. I took pride in keeping those buildings clean and safe for kids to learn in. There's nothing shameful about working hard and earning an honest living." Marcus's face flushed. "Mom, of course there isn't. I didn't mean..." "Yes, you did. You meant to make me sound more respectable, more worthy of these people's attention. But I don't need to be respectable by their standards. I need to be respected by my own family." The conversation died completely. People began drifting away to other parts of the house, leaving Marcus and me standing alone. "I was trying to help," he said quietly. "No, you were trying to manage the situation. Just like your wife has been trying to manage me for 8 years. That's not fair, isn't it? Marcus, in the past month, how many times have you called me? How many times has Esme shown up at my apartment? Compare that to the past 2 years, when I was lucky to hear from you twice a month." He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. "The only thing that changed is your knowledge of my bank account," I continued. "I'm the same person I was before. I live in the same apartment, drive the same car, have the same values, but now I'm worth your attention. I love you, Mom. I know you do, but love without respect isn't enough anymore." Emma appeared beside us, her face flushed with excitement. "Grandma, are you really going on a cruise by yourself? That's amazing. I want to be like you when I'm older." I smiled at her, this wonderful girl who saw adventure where her parents saw danger, independence where they saw loneliness. "You can be anything you want to be, Emma. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Will you send me pictures from Europe? Of course. Are you coming back? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? Well, you seem different lately. Like you're not going to let people treat you badly anymore. Are you coming back to the same life? Or are you going to do something different? Out of the mouths of babes. This 16-year-old had identified something I'd been struggling to articulate even to myself. I'm coming back, I said. But you're right. Some things are going to be different. After the party, as I was getting ready to leave, Marcus walked me to my car. Mom, I'm sorry about tonight, about what Esme said, about how I introduced you. You're right. We haven't been treating you the way you deserve. No, you haven't. Can we try again? Can we start over? I looked at my son, this man I'd raised alone, who'd grown up to prioritize appearances over authenticity. I still loved him, but I was no longer willing to accept crumbs of affection disguised as love. Marcus, I'm 64 years old. I spent the first 18 years of your life putting you first, and the last 8 years accepting whatever scraps of attention you were willing to give me. I'm done with both. What does that mean? It means that when I come back from my cruise, I'm going to be living differently. I'm going to travel, try new things, meet new people. I'm going to stop waiting for my family to decide I'm worth their time. But we want to be part of your life. Do you? Or do you want to be part of my bank account? He flinched. That's not fair. Fair would have been including me in your family 8 years ago. Fair would have been standing up to your wife when she excluded me from holidays and birthdays. Fair would have been treating me like your mother instead of an obligation. I got into my car and rolled down the window. I love you, Marcus. I always have and I always will. But I'm done being grateful for the bare minimum of respect from my own family. So what happens now? Now I go live my life, and if you want to be part of it, you'll have to earn that privilege. I drove away without looking back. 3 weeks later, I boarded a ship in Barcelona for a 2-month Mediterranean cruise. My cabin was small but comfortable, with a window overlooking the sea. As the ship pulled away from the dock, I stood on the deck watching Spain fade into the distance. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely free. Free from other people's expectations, free from the need to prove my worth, free from waiting for love that came with conditions. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Have the best time ever, Grandma. Can't wait to hear about your adventures. And another from Marcus. I love you, Mom. I hope you know that. I did know that. But I also knew that love without respect, without effort, without genuine appreciation for who I was as a person, wasn't enough anymore. At dinner that first night, I sat at a table with 3 other solo travelers, a retired teacher from Ohio, a widow from Australia, and a former nurse from Canada. We talked about our lives, our dreams, our plans for the future. None of them cared that I'd been a janitor. They were interested in who I was, not what I could do for them. As I went to sleep that first night, listening to the gentle motion of the ship, and feeling truly at peace for the first time in years, I realized something important. I'd spent my whole life being defined by my relationships to other people, as a wife, a mother, a mother-in-law, a grandmother. But now, finally, I was just Darla, a woman with her own money, her own plans, her own life to live, and it was going to be a good life, with or without my family's approval. The best part? I no longer needed their permission to live it. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.